Hey everybody, this is Michael, and this is my project for fall 2019, my capstone project. The name of my project is Simple Database Package for Sociology. This is my second semester on this project, and the main focus that I want to have you guys look at is the implementation and the coding. Last semester I had undergone the plans prior. I'll give a brief review on that. But I also want to show my software that I've created and demonstrate how it works and explain its significance. So without further ado, the quick background to this project is I was a student in sociology. I studied sociology as my master's degree. And as a sociology student, I had seen various research methods such as quantitative methods or qualitative methods. The difference between the two is quantitative methods uses statistics, surveying, etc. Other like quantitative numbers-based research methods, whereas qualitative uses interview and ethnographic studies. It uses one-to-one interviews, things like that. Now, the discipline continues to evolve and continues to employ methods from recent technological innovations, such as database. Now, many sociology students have never had the opportunity to use their technology for either research or leisure purpose. This lost opportunity is a gap within the current array of research methods being utilized for sociology. Therefore, my software program will be created to fill this gap. Now, this picture right here is taken from SPSS, which is a statistical package for social science. It is a statistical package software that is used to do regression analysis or other statistical analysis with. Now, the problem with SPSS is that it's highly complicated, and sometimes it's not always easy for the layman, and it also costs money. My thing is meant to be simple, it's meant to be adaptive, and it's meant to be free. So I want to go to this part. This is the original design in my design stage. And when I completed my design, this is what I created through implementation and coding. And as you can see, very similar, but some aesthetic differences, mostly because certain places when I was creating the when I was implementing the code, implementing the design, I felt that certain places needed to be moved around in different locations. For example, the reset and the exit, I moved them over here. The query, I moved that over here. And this part, I moved in an entirely different class. I've created a login class and a startup class. But essentially, I followed very strictly to my designs. Now, this was my final management work schedule, my WBS, and you can see that my estimated hours was well under the actual hours that I spent on this project. This is something that I found this was a great learning moment for me because I realized during this entire project I think I often underestimated how much work needed to be put into creating such a project. And part of it is my lack of skills, since I'm relatively new in this field. But this project, the challenge it provided, had allowed me to push myself to a new place where I think I'm much better because of it. So, this is the overall difference, 100 hours between the estimated and the actual. I learned that in the future, if I ever do another project, I need to work better on my plans so that I can avoid making last-minute changes, which increases the overall actual hours. So something to study for in the future, factory designs, etc. So now here's my UML design, and the UML design is generally the same, except the read queries function here. I essentially added this part and put it within the user interface GUI. But essentially, the design is the same. The use case is the same. Start program, log in. They can either reset or exit. Once they're logged in, they can use the interface. This will use the user interface where they can select or select all, set conditions, set no conditions, generate table results. And these are the processes to implement, which is the SDPS application, the login menu, accessing the database, exiting program, reset database. The user interface will have interface functions, which will be a one-to-one relationship, and it will use processes from the DB columns to process queries strings. The reading queries, this is actually within user interface, so this is a bit different. And of course, this is the same. The deployment is exactly the same. Desktop PC runs the SDPS, and the SPS uses the JDBC driver to access the MySQL database. Now, the risks that had occurred during this project have been, well, the toughest risk, the highest risk, had been insufficient coding skills, and this had troubled me quite a bit because there are just many areas where perhaps it took longer to complete than it should have with someone with better, more sufficient coding skills. Nonetheless, it is a risk that can be overcome when you work early on this project, work early and work minimalist. And what I mean by that is just focus on each function and build it and make it bigger and bigger versus doing bad coding practice where you try to write the whole program at once. Such an act is disastrous. Now, I did a test, and I'm going to go through this test with you because this test is very accurate in terms of like how this thing works. So let's start up the simple database package for sociology. Now, the first part of the test is starting the SDPS. And does it start? Of course. Now, my database is my MySQL workbench. It's a local database, as you can see here. And here is my table. So my program should be able to access the world.sql schema with no problem. And one way to access my local database is currently my username is root. My password is password. But if I type password 1, what will happen is password is not correct, please type in password. So this output is set up so that we can access MySQL Workbench with no difficulty. So remove that, hit enter, and there we are. And so this is the user interface, and this is the most complicated part of the entire project. Now this user interface has 3 tables because the schema here only has 3 tables. And let's say I select the city table. Well, these are all the columns associated with city. And you can see over here that these are our conditions. So we can use this to manipulate our data. We can use this to be more specific. Now, let's say I want to do a simple query. And I'm looking for the code, the country name, and the continent. And I click add. And I set it to none. Then I generate the query. Well, as you can see right here, it works perfectly. But the results are a little too much. So what we want to do is we want to look for a specific, let's say we want to look for a specific country. So I start another query. I do this all over again. I add these columns. I click where. Let's say the country name I want to look for is Japan. Now, like any query, I would just set it to none. Add. And this pop-up menu I added because I realized it would be more user-friendly to explain that the condition has been added. So I add it, I generate the query, boom. We have the country code, we have the country name, we have the continent. Let's do it one more time. So we pick these again, we add them, we click the where, and let's add the country name Japan, and then let's say Japan or, and we can see right here in our query SQL that it's showing us the statement that's happening. And this SQL, this query thing is quite accurate, and I'll show you in a moment how it works in my SQL workbench. So now let's say the new country I want to compare to is China. So I click none, and I hit add. And you can see that the text output updates. So it has Japan and it has China. I generate the query, boom, China and Japan both are there. Now, let's say I want to combine two tables. Well, I have four different join options available. And let's say I want to look at code, country name, continent, and then I want to look at language. So I select like that, and I can choose an inner join. I can choose a full join. Now, one note about the full join is that the full join cannot be used in MySQL workbench. So instead of a full join, we're using a union all join to essentially create a full join. We can do left join, we can do right join. So let's say I want to do an inner join, and I click add. And I haven't set up this program to do conditions with joins just because I want to make it simple. In further versions, in later versions, I will allow conditions so that we can be more specific with our results. I select none, I generate the results, and here they are. So these are the countries, and these are their code, their country name, their continent, and their language. Obviously, in the future, if I make another version, I'll set up the where condition so that I can zoom in what I'm looking for. Now, if I take this query, so simple Control A and Control copy, and then I put it in my Microsoft Workbench, new query tab, okay, or let's just do this, and then I copy and paste, and I hit this. Well, the query is exactly the same. The results are exactly the same as this. So let's look at our tests. In our tests, start SDPS. Does the program successfully runs? It passes. Login. Does the program successfully log in and access the database? Yes. Does it reset? Well, I'll get to that later. Select. Does the select button allows the tester to choose from one or many columns from the table? Yes. Does the select all functions successfully allow? Now, we don't really have a true select all function, rather it's mouse pressed. So for example, let's say I do city, and I want to select all this. Simply, I would just hit shift on my keyboard and click, and boom, I select all that, I set to none, and I generate the results, and there they are. So, further on, set conditions. Can we set all the conditions? Of course. Can we set no conditions? Yes, we have. No conditions here on this results. Does it produce an accurate SQL statement in the SQL output? Let's test it again. So let's remove this, and let's do this again. Let's see if I got everything. I think I do, and let's restart. And there we go. It produces the same results. So number one, COBOL, AFG, COBOL, a big number. Let's look at our results over here. This one right here. Same thing. So let's look at the last part. It generates results, yes, and exit. Does it successfully exit? Well, let's try the reset. Does our program allow to reset itself? Yes. And does it exit? Yes. So, in conclusion, the documentation for the project's complete, and the implementation will start. Well, it is fall semester, so the implementation has been completed. And I'd like to say that this project has been an idea I've been thinking about for a while, just making a simple user interface for students to learn in an introduction class to databases. Something that they can learn as another method that can be used for sociology. Demography, for example, is often, many sociologists like to use demographic statistics for research, and such a program as mine is meant to introduce a new student to that concept. So in the future, I'd like to expand on it. I'd like to make it better. I wanted to make it more flexible. I would even want to add a search engine where we don't even have to use buttons, but simply we just write a simple natural language statement, and the project can just automatically read it. So this is things I'd like to do in the future. Anyway, that is my project, and I hope you guys enjoyed. By the way, in addition to that, I had created a usability test, and I've also created a manual to help anyone set this up if they're interested in it. Now, the project is meant for MySQL Workbench. It's not set up for any other database integrated development software, but one day I'll try to make it so that it can do all of it. Anyhow, this is my project. Thank you again for listening, and I hope you guys have a great day.